Thanks, buddy. It's lovely to see everyone here. Let's see. So my name's Tony. I'd like to take a moment just to pause and connect. Now, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. And let's sense how we are all at this very moment. Sharing the air around us. Drawing in the breath that sustains the life of each and every one of us. And this invisible commons. We can know it in several ways. We can measure its components, its pressure and flow, and attach value, maybe, to the absence of pollutants. And we know it with our bodies. Our body knows what to do with this air. A kind of knowing that we've carried with us since our first breath, as have all our ancestors. And we can maybe know with our ancestral mind, our dreaming mind, our kinship mind, that we have, on average, one atom in our body from every breath that every human has ever taken. Now, open your eyes. This is the earth breathing. And look at how we can see those atmospheric rivers breathed out by rainforests in Southeast Asia, across the tropics of Africa. I invite you to look especially at this river of moisture that is breathed in and out by the Amazon rainforest. The air you breathe now has been breathed by the Amazon through this atmospheric river. It's been released down through rains, pumped up by plants multiple times as it flows from east to west, down and up into North America, Turtle Island, and across back to Europe, affecting the airflow and the weather patterns across the entire atmosphere of our Earth, our biospheric lungs. And in many ways, the beating heart of our planet, this global commons. It's both vitally essential and somehow a bit poetically abstract to our human mind. And yet the Amazon is a local commons too, or rather a collection of commons, sources of everything needed for the physical, emotional, and spiritual thriving and nourishment of the people who live on its territories, their garden, the home they share with their more than human kin, enriched by layers of ancestral continuity and spirits. We'll return to the Amazon, for it is one of many local commons that can connect us towards values and practices that we share as a global family. So our shared biosphere, the complex living systems and ecologies that sustain us in our interrelationality, we've all seen, heard, felt, perhaps become a little bit numbed to the images and the data points and the warnings of dire impending climate disaster and ecological collapse. Today, as we witness the countries and companies, the power-centralizing markets and institutions that we have inherited, failing to address the gaps jurisdictionally, culturally, systematically, because of their incentives and the flow of power, resources, attention they channel. And yet these systems and institutions pervade everything we do in ways we are conscious and unconscious of. If I may introduce myself a little more and relate myself to this beautiful context, this gathering of commons-aligned minds and souls. Who am I? Who are we? Why are we? And what are we going to cover in the next 15, 20 minutes? I call home, I co-live, and am growing in relation with the land, the hills, the healing waters, and the forests, with our Embassy Network family in San Francisco and at Wilbur Hot Springs, at Fatopia in France, and in the Mangaroa Valley in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I go by Open Tony, and the name my Chinese parents gave me is Li Jia Hao, which can mean pure lawyer of the family of the darkness before dawn. And I've always been fascinated by the many diverse stories, belief systems, rituals, and relationships that shape our shared realities, as well as what lies between those realities. I was reminded the other night that the darkness before dawn, as the moon is setting, just before the sun rises, that's when you can best see a sort of shimmering aura around the mountains and the trees. I was born and brought up in the embrace of modernity, Britain, self-styled great, an inside outsider in elite contexts and institutions, reading history and then law, nurturing and gathering community around entrepreneurship, access to justice, legal technology, social impact, and then blockchain law and policy. Many ways of thinking, feeling, learning about how will we live together. This time last year, I was with some of you here at DWeb Camp in the forests of Northern California, where, with the Internet Archive and MetaGov, we curated the Redwood Parliament, a collection of workshops, an emergence of discussion threads, and an interweaving of interdisciplinary beings. We gathered to share research and experiences around governance, and to learn from the 400 or so attendees of this retreat in the Redwoods, our aspirational goal for this emergence and interweaving, to create governance layers for the internet. And part of why we're all here together at Funding the Commons is because we believe we can be empowered to act beyond, between, above, and around these systems and institutions. To borrow from the DWeb principles, we can practice creating technologies for human agency, distributing benefits in mutual respect and acknowledgement of our humanity and ecological awareness. The DWeb, Web3, computational law, transparency, accountability, monitoring, and graduated sanctions, seamless resolution of conflict, compassionate and humane enforcement, seeking out the better angels of our natures. We come together, we dream together, build together, because we believe in the better tools and stories, technologies and mythologies that we might yet weave together as a community for the common good, for the public good. And so when we look to our ecological commons, our bioregional and planetary commons, we see solutions a little much too focused on finance that don't necessarily integrate the whole ecosystem, the cultural and psychological context that is required for truly regenerative living worlds to remain or emerge. Carbon credit processes, so often not established or executed quite in right relation, dismissing the non-measurables, such as biodiversity. Solutionism with techno-philanthro-industrial complexes, often failing to create regenerative, sovereign models for local culture keepers and land defenders and their non-human kin. We see north-south co-learning hindered by language and accessibility barriers to gatherings, and where these environments are often biased towards a sort of modern colonial solutionist way of knowing and interacting. We see activist communities beginning to examine how the patterns of their strategies and messaging often emulate the narratives of the systems they're trying to change. Urgency, divisiveness, outcome-focused, shame and guilt-evoking. And these deep-rooted, opaque narratives of exceptionalism, othering, scarcity, transactionality, separation, heroism, that have been inherited by all of us, that maybe need to be lured from the individual and collective shadows so they don't continue projecting their harm into the potential solutions we might create together. So we're all walking our paths, and we're at different stages along our paths, but we are walking together, sensing and seeing each other's narratives and ways of knowing, supporting each other in growing. We've been gathering together in person, on the land, in various places around the world and online. And it wasn't until recently that I came to understand how much my own thoughts, feelings, and ways of learning were so thoroughly shaped by these modern world institutions and systems around me. But it's thanks to being around people with these different ontologies that this is a story of stepping outside of those institutions to both learn but also unlearn. These different ways of knowing where modern narratives of separateness, ownership, transactionality get balanced with ancestral practices of commoning and relationality, collective good and conviviality. And so finding the ways to nurture and hold these kinds of spaces in kinship where, to tag Tyson, there are no isolated variables, where every element must be considered in relation to other elements and the context, from doing to being, to becoming with. And so we are reborn and relearning in the context of this community, in the embrace of kinship, swimming in the flows of institutionality, empathy, and resonance with all life and with the interconnectedness, the music, the rhythms, the melodies and harmonies that open pathways from tragedy to a symphony of the commons. I mentioned a word there, exstitutionality, that may sound familiar to some of you, but if I may unfurl a little. It's a neologism, a made-up word we've been playing with, because it has a feel to it, perhaps a little rebelliousness, but it seems to speak to many, and it speaks to what eco-weaving is and is not. Born out of jams amongst common aligned kin, you may already exstitutionally relate to Primavera and Jessie Kate. Fascinated as we were by institutional and organizational theory, we sought to find a counterpart, exstitutional theory, which might pattern and unfold the social dynamics of relationality, resonance, what it means to have coordination beyond rules and roles, beyond the naming and the boxing. What does it mean to flow and be a part of a process, a movement, to be seen not for the role that you can play or what institution you represent, but to have a place, a space where you can be seen and witnessed, cared for and celebrated for the sheer fullness of you. Wow, thank you for being all of you, the light and the dark threads, the shadows and the shining visionary beacons. Ecoweaving is not a new institution, nor a new solution. Ecoweaving gestures towards a plurality, a pluriverse of paths and initiatives, weaving people, projects, places, and worldviews, nurturing the commoning through shared principles and practices, seeking out and calling in both indigenous wisdoms and innovation from intersections in finance, ecology, computational law, mythology, and beyond. Physical, digital, interpersonally neurobiological spaces to unlearn harmful narratives and seep connection and kinship into the spheres habituated by transactionality. A polycentric learning and unlearning journey, an open source, adaptable process that is itself a commons, weaving local projects and pattern integrities like knots of pluriversal gnosis across the globe. What do we mean by learning and unlearning? Can we unlearn these many separate stories of separation to embrace a story of co-learning and co-design? Because the loss of commons to late-stage capitalism has severed and deprived many of us from our ancestral practices of commoning, and with it the web of relationality across most of our lives. As we are seeking and striving to be re-establishing those commons, how can we be in the process of re-establishing a deep, somatic, embodied knowing of intimacy with commoning that will sustain commons-based ecologies for generations to come and heal the rifts of this separation story? Learning and unlearning, and learning to learn. It's less about moving forward most effectively and more the sway back and forth, to dance, to relate, to trust, and to move together. Maybe not in ways we might expect, but acknowledging our inherent unity and interdependence, cultivating our capacity to act in integrity of the whole, walking together on a learning journey, honoring the innate sovereignty and personhood of all, harmonizing our relations through the pursuit of truth and right action, achieving coherence between the material, spiritual, and social dimensions of reality. And so to return, as I promised, to the Amazon, the stewards of this ecosystem have been continually commoning their lands for thousands of years. And though the encroachment of modernity and its extractivist tendrils, roads are being built to haul out these extractions, but held as progressive opportunities, yet they continue to have pressure put on them. And it's interrupting that commoning culture. And it increases the chances that this commons will be grabbed to feed exponential growth. So a group of us came at their invitation to the Amazon earlier this year, invited by specifically some groups from the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative, a group of around 30 federations that cover the territories over 30 million hectares in Ecuador and Peru of the headwaters of the Amazon, to explore an experience of deep somatic knowing. And we met with some of the leaders and representatives to learn more about how these communities are currently being faced with cash offers for illegal logging, road building for oil companies, and what they call carbon cowboys for carbon. These offers are not standardized. They're often undervaluing precious natural resources and or pitting both families and communities against each other. These actors from that same late capitalist system are now encroaching with a promise to save them from the extraction of capitalism, unaware of the harm done to community integrity by separates and is finance focused and is driven by the big institutional players, that kind of a maybe monoculture lens is not going to see the biodiversity, and that's very much the case with the current carbon market. And this is not just an intellectual journey. It is a journey of aligning the mind, the body, and to some extent the spirit, not just collectively, but with these feedback loops between our bodies, human and non-human. So as we reclaim the physical commons, what does it mean to reclaim this emotional, this spiritual commons that will expand us from citizens or consumers towards being stewards and co-learning participants? Like I said, we've been offered this mandate to gather a wider collective of humans innovating at this intersection of biodiversity and living world value systems and decentralized technologies, to share our knowledge and the available tools that could help them to build a life valuing, community regenerating ecology on their terms, a sacred economy that is resilient in its values as it interacts with the open market. And there are two main ideas developing. One is for the stewards of these regions to create a sort of sellers cartel to identify and standardize pricing and conditions that they would accept, that they would design. Secondly, to develop a fund to engage as a buyer to this cartel for these advanced ecological credits that potentially they might create. But both of these will take a bit of time. There's a need to buy time for them to learn about the opportunities and the implications related to financialization. And there's a need to buy time to organize and coordinate and germinate the seeds of an alliance across a complex geographic environment and social political relationships. And so this is a little bit of what it might look like to create a sacred economy, an integrated process that can start to heal us from this illusion of separateness. This idea that we create, in a sense, a gap from the modern global economy, an exclosure, some of us might say, that allows this different kind of relationality to develop internally, based maybe on concepts that they find more familiar, like buen vivir and sumak kamana. It's a set of principles that relate to this idea of conviviality and kinship. I'll skip over this. There's more details around this planned approach that I can go into with you, but at heart, this is also not just a storytelling, a learning and unlearning, but it's about ecosystem building, the commons of relationality that can help us to recognize everybody's contributions to an eco-commons, that can weave between law, governance, finance, regenerative ecology, satellite imagery, digital measurement, reporting and verification, rights of nature, art, music and mythology. What does it look like to have such an interoperable commons weaving between places and projects so that seeing your contributions in one bioregion, you can be recognized across many? Nurturing these new interoperable value frameworks beyond the status symbols and masks that we are unconsciously manipulated into wearing. These are some of the inspirations for how global narratives can be disempowering. Donna Haraway suggests that our response to present conditions should not be narrowly focused on man as the superior species, stargazing homo, but on the complex of all living critters. This idea of responsibility suggests that we are responsible for our responses to the ongoing environmental issue. And so there is this opportunity for this joint learning journey. And this is transitional. We don't have the solutions. And if we claim to have them, we're probably wrong. But we don't need to not build. We don't need to not create. And we can create these holding spaces, encouraging each other to mingle and merge into an ever greater thou. So what threads can we weave on our journey forth? I have one more minute, and I'm just going to finish with a little lyrical offering. The relevance of distributed ecosystem consonants, beyond dissonance between different layers of the stack. We find our deliverance from strife and mental servitude. Beyond slavery to surveillance capital, we seed resistance to the prediction productization of our minds, our wills. We build the strength to say no to the gilded personalization of these pretenders to the panoptic overlord thrones. We still don't know how these threads keep weaving, but we're happy letting go of needing to know what is right, ripe in listening and suspending disbelief if for a while. It's been time to reflect on the transformations we've been seeing in ourselves, the power of a method, mindset, open source heart set of trust building, transitioning the way we discourse, we and community, spiraling axes of self-awareness, pattern integrities of politics and probities, collective and individual diplomacies and principles, unlearning and learning together. The chorus of life springs up from every side, ebbing and flowing. These crescendos keep on coming while we closed our eyes, dropping into breath and bodying, letting go of minding for feeling and sensing, seeing each other, weaving executions of truth speakers, light seekers, space keepers, seers of commoning, courage seeking, moral imagining, snow piercing, to stop the train for the heart seeding interrelational hope and humanity, technoetic intimacy. How might we constantly be playing with the tools of collective consciousness, elevating, digital, physical, neurobiological, spiritual, freeing our minds, our souls, our bodies, listening to the winds swing in accelerandos full of flowing and freeing, then slowing to lift the veil of knowing for listening, unburdening, hearing stories in our souls, rallying once again, hairs on end, flying, hyperstitions rising like mist, a soft kiss of collective eco-woven sovereignty. What futures are you weaving?